Web Marketing That Works, episode 56.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hi there, my name is Toby Jenkins and this is the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web, and today I'm talking with Tom Morkes. Now, Tom's got a really interesting background. He graduated from the US Military Academy at West Point and then spent 5 years as a commissioned officer in Iraq. And that was when he turned entrepreneur, when he left the army and started his own publishing business and publishing consulting business as well. And he helped one of our previous guests, Dan Norris, with his book, The 7-Day Startup. So we're talking today about collaboration and how it's helped him to build really powerful relationships with influencers, and the specifics of things like how he crafts his outreach process and literally some of the detail that goes into his email. And finally, he talks about the key lessons that he took away from the military and how he applies those lessons every day in his business and in his marketing. Not to forget the very important question that Tom shares as well in terms of getting in touch with influencers and particularly building those relationships too. So I'd really encourage you to listen out for that. This show is brought to you by our book, Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus 33 free templates that go with it. Please head on over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Let's get this started. So, Tom, thanks so much for joining me on the show today, mate. It's just a pleasure to have you.
Toby, thanks so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, Tom, before we jump into sort of the business and marketing and that part of this discussion, I'd really love to know what gets you out of bed each morning.
A cup of coffee. No, or a glass of beer. No, for me, I get up and it's really just the different projects I'm working on. So we were talking offline, obviously, before we started this recording. My background is in the military, so I got out a little over a year ago now. And since then, I've just been kind of doing my own thing, which is publishing and a few of these kind of offshoots of that, which we'll dig into, I'm sure, a little bit later. But so for me, it's just a matter of when I wake up, I kind of just get the opportunity, which is really cool, to work on a bunch of different creative projects, whether it's me by myself or a lot of times I do a lot of collaborative projects these days. And so it's working with great people to produce really cool things. And in the context of business, I mean, that totally is something I love to do. So that's what gets me out of bed every day.
Yeah, and in fact, you've got a new book coming up as well. Is it out? Collaborate, the new rules of launching a business online? Yeah,
well, I'm guessing when this goes live, it will be under development. Right now, as of the conversation we're having right now, there's 2 days left. So I'm crowdfunding it right now. There's 2 days left, but we're at 153% funded, which is really cool. So it's funded. Just the last couple of days, we'll see if there's any more sales that come in or any more pre-orders. Yep. But yeah, it was a successful campaign.
Fantastic, mate. That's great to hear. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Insurgent Publishing then, which is your business, right? Does that tie all of your sort of creative projects together?
It's, at some point I probably have to figure that out because I have so many wheels spinning, but it doesn't, right now it's not like what I house everything underneath it. So it's its own kind of entity, its own beast in that respect. Yep. But Insurgent Publishing, so yeah, what it is essentially a boutique publishing company. And so it's essentially saying, obviously there's quite a bit of money in the publishing world. I think it's like 24 billion or something like that, projected to go up to like 60 billion over the next 5 years. So it's a market that, when I looked at it, I love books, I love reading, I love nonfiction. I've always been a fan of it. But I also, having that inspiration, I've always loved working creatively with other people as well. So I've done my own writing and stuff like that and self-published, but I always wanted to kind of work with other creatives to produce stuff. So that was the reason I wanted to get into it. And again, understanding that financially it wouldn't be a bad thing to get into. And then what it's kind of evolved into from that is we have about, 6 or so authors, individual authors that we publish through Insurgent Publishing. We published a business magazine called Bootstrapped. We've done a number of different projects like that. And now recently, that was kind of an offshoot of Insurgent Publishing. I started consulting with individual authors, not actually publishing their books through my platform, but saying, hey, I do all this marketing, all this other stuff in and around books. publishing is something that it takes a while from the inception of the idea to actually getting it out there. And so in the case of the book I'm sure we'll talk about, which is the 7-Day Startup by Dan Norris of WP Curve, Absolutely. Who I know you know, of course, brilliant dude. And he wrote this awesome book and he was just getting ready to launch it. So we talked and he was like, well, I'd love your help promoting this, marketing it. And I was right up my alley, to be honest with you, because again, the aspect of publishing takes a while. So I had this like time in between these books that come out through my own company. And it's like, what do you do with that time? So I was like, well, I'll try this consulting out. So now that's become a piece of Insurgent Publishing where I do book consulting with authors. So that kind of came organically, if you will. I didn't expect that to happen, but that's happened over the last few months now. Yeah,
cool. And so how did Dan track you down for that?
I tracked him down. He was actually putting something out on his blog. So I've been reading WP Curve for a while, the blog, and I was pretty familiar with what they were doing and the quality of the content they were producing. They were saying, hey, we're looking at a content marketer for our company as an internship. So I reached out to, believe it or not, to Dan and saying, hey man, tell me more about this position. I don't know if I'm the right deal for it, but basically he was positioning that you'd get to learn the insides in and outs of his business. And in exchange, right, and he'd pay, obviously not a great amount, but I didn't really care about the money aspect of it. I was just saying to myself, well, it'd be cool to kind of learn the ins and outs of this business if I can come in and provide some written content for him, and get the opportunity to work with them and kind of, and then also maybe even leverage that platform for what I'm doing, right? So it was like, I saw this great opportunity and I talked to him. He's like, we basically have a guy already. So he's like, but, you mentioned your publisher. He liked the fact that I sent in kind of a video proposition to him and how I could build the WP Curve platform, like what I would do with it to build it from a content standpoint, marketing standpoint. And he's like, well, I got this book I need help on. So it was kind of totally unexpected, great twist. It worked out perfectly. He still let me write for his blog, which is pretty incredible, which is, I wrote a blog post that got a lot of traction, a lot of hits, about the book marketing process we went through to actually publish 7-Day Startup, which then for me, that turned into a lot of new additional clients. So, I don't know. It's kind of crazy how all these different things kind of panned out, but it's all been good so far.
Fantastic. That blog post was how we're talking, really, because that was where you sort of lifted the kimono, so to speak, and, shared so much detail in that post. I'll get a link to it as well in the show notes, but it was an absolute cracker. So thanks for sharing all those insights too, Tom.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So can you tell us, in terms of, just still on the business then, in terms of like, what's your team look like? I know, again, we were talking offline and you were saying you're traveling around a fair bit, but presumably you've got a bit of help, or?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to describe. So for Insurgent Publishing, it's so interesting, or at least to me, it's interesting because, so I do Insurgent Publishing, but then I also collaborate on other projects. So I'm a co-founder of High Speed Low Drag, which is a veterans network and platform for veterans. And then I also co-launched the Flight Formula, which is a business incubator program, heart center business incubator program. So it's a bit of a change on the traditional kind of business incubator model. And so all those different projects, those I have co-founders. So John Lee Dumas, Antonio Centeno are my co-founders on High Speed Low Drag, and then Jason Spencer for the Flight Formula. So they, so that's kind of how I work with them on those different projects. And then for Insurgent Publishing, though, I have a couple of VAs that I use, and I'm starting to kind of build out that team right now, going through that painful but necessary process of trying to scale and realizing, okay, all these things that I'm doing right now, I need to outsource, or I need to systematize better. And so really up to this point, up into the last few months, I've been doing so much of it myself, and it's great to bootstrap things that way, but now I'm at the point where it's just not sustainable, and it's not worth my time. Let's put it that way. So I have to kind of, these smaller subtasks I need to kind of start outsourcing. So I'm going through that process right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. We've been experimenting, particularly in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, although we've experimented over longer periods of time as well with outsourcing, but we seem to be getting the hang of it in the last little while.
Yeah.
And so those various tasks.
Yeah. And on the context of publishing itself, so I'm talking, outsourcing in terms of kind of the more, I suppose, operational pieces of it, or at least kind of like having a virtual assistant or something like that to do a lot of the more, smaller tasks that tie up a lot of time. But as far as Insurgent Publishing, though, actually a lot of what I've leveraged is through the audience that I built up at tommorkes.com. I've had a lot of editors and artists and writers reach out to me, and so I built those relationships. So actually, that's where I outsource pieces like that. So I'm not necessarily an editor myself, but I have editors that I work with. And so on a project by project basis, I'll reach out to them and work with them for different books that we publish. artists, same deal. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of interesting. I don't actually have employees for those positions. I just, through my own network, kind of outsource on an individual basis for different projects.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That must make it interesting and also get you focused on the piece that you really love doing, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a couple of things that I've noticed on your tommorkes.com. One was that a disciplined approach to success is, your sort of tagline, I guess. What do you mean by that? Can you share with us, where that came from as well?
It's funny. It's something I just put on my site, I think maybe a month or two ago. I just did a big transition on my site to basically a customized theme through the new Rainmaker platform through Copyblogger, which is kind of cool. But and then had it kind of custom made. But anyway, so kind of going through that transition, I had this old website that was just, basic theme, nothing special. And then transitioning to something better. I was like, my website was in need of a drastic overhaul, in my opinion. And so as I was putting it together, I was meeting with a friend, basically a friend of a friend, and talking a little bit. He was the one that brought up, he's like, I don't know why you don't promote the fact that you're a West Pointer and that you're in the military more, and then you don't make that kind of the focal point of what you do. He's like, when I think of West Pointers, I think of Army, guys in the Army or officers or whatever. I think of, a disciplined approach to success. So I didn't even come up with that term. He just said it. I was like, wow, that's... I crowdsource everything. So that's how that came up. And I was like, that's a really good tagline. So I'm going to use that for now. And so what that means is it's again, that's an impression that people have. And it's like, I might as well use that impression to make that my angle, because I think there's only so many military people out there that are doing stuff online. So it gives me a bit of a marketing edge and marketing angle in the context of how I do business, which is, again, that concept of disciplined approach to success, that I analyze things, that I'm going to backward plan things, that I'm not going to come at something shooting from the hip necessarily, but that it's going to be more methodical. And that's the kind of stuff I like to teach through my own blog platform, whether it's publishing or marketing or these other different projects that I've collaborated on and launched. I always try to break things down into kind of very easy to follow step-by-step processes. So that's kind of how I approach everything. So a disciplined approach to success, that's kind of how it came about.
Oh, that's awesome. And I mean, great to take the words of, one of your audience as well and use it.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool to hear. And yeah. I mean, to that point, you're methodical in your approach and the discipline around it. Do you have sort of rituals that you go through or daily routines that you follow, to improve your performance and get in the right mindset and get you fired up in the morning or throughout the day?
One of the things, again, as we were talking offline, so I've been traveling for the last year and we're still kind of nomadic. My wife and I hopping around country to country. So we'll be in the Philippines this January and then Thailand a couple months later and all over. And one of the tough things, and that's fun and it's cool. And I enjoy it. I really do. But it takes a toll in the constant travel and moving around. And from a creative standpoint, it's kind of tough because it's such a challenge to build things when you're moving around a lot. So for me, I found that I've always been flexible. I've always been a flexible person in terms of I don't need to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and go through the same process that I know a lot of creatives might go through, writers and stuff like that. Like which I've heard these stories and I'm actually kind of jealous that, you can wake up and you can have this routine. And so I don't, but I'm okay with that. I'm a different kind of personality. I can survive in that kind of uncertainty and that, I guess, difficulty of not knowing where you're going to be the next night kind of thing. And so I've been fine doing that. So for me, what grounds me is just, I am very meticulous about my calendar, meticulous about how I develop whatever launches that I'm doing for books or other products or services or whatever. I track my time, using Toggle. I use I have a certain maybe 10 resources, 10 tools that I use religiously, every day. And to keep me on point, because otherwise the travel would take a toll. But to get me grounded, no, as long as I have coffee, I'm usually good to go.
Yeah, I can imagine there'd be a lot of listeners who would fall in that bag as well, bucket, me included. So, yeah, I mean, how have you found then your military background has helped in terms of, now that you've been a year or a bit more in business, how have you found that helping?
I think it kind of comes back to the same elements that I mentioned there, is kind of being able to deal in that uncertainty, and being able to respond to situations that aren't ideal. I mean, that was my life in the Army. It was you have to do something with limited resources and limited time, go make it happen. And I mean, that's what I did for the last 5 years. That, and a lot of, as an officer in the Army, it was operational style stuff. It was project management style stuff. So I don't have a degree or certification in project management that I know of. Maybe I do somewhere that I just forgot about. But the fact of the matter is I am very comfortable managing and leading people and projects, especially in less than ideal circumstances and with not enough resources. So yeah, I mean, that's been the biggest thing for me, is having that background and being comfortable in uncertainty.
It's a pretty handy skill set to have developed in terms of jumping into entrepreneurship and business. No doubt about that. All right, Tom, well, let's jump into sort of your marketing philosophy then, because I'd love to hear, you've had quite an unorthodox path in terms of some of the various elements to your background with pricing and consulting and publishing and all that kind of stuff. And, pay-as-you-go pricing particularly was interesting to read a whole lot more about. So what is your marketing philosophy?
Gosh, I guess if I had one, it's just whatever gets people's attention and keeps it in terms of marketing in such a way that's ethical or moral and speaks for whatever I'm shipping at the time or launching at the time. So obviously I've done a number of projects, but that's really the question, right? Or that's really the challenge of, and the whole purpose behind marketing is the nature of the environment that we're in. Everything, it's all noise out there. There's so much noise. So how do you find that signal, right? The noise versus the signal. So, and the nature of everything online is that just everything's getting noisier and noisier, which you can take as a negative, or you can just say, fine, there's a lot more noise out there. There's a lot more things going on, a lot of things that are challenging, or taking people's attention. So how do you get in front of them? But more importantly, not just get in front of them, but like in such a way that they want to listen, that they choose to listen. So it's a whole permission marketing concept. So I'm a big proponent of the things Seth Godin teaches. He's always been kind of an inspiration for me in the context of marketing. And so for book publishing specifically, it's how do we get in front of the people who want to hear or read this book? Because, we're connected. We have millions of connections online. Certainly there's going to be at least 1,000 people that want to read every book that gets published if you can reach those 1,000 people. And if the book, that's assuming that the book is actually, legitimate, which are generally the only books that I work on. I think they are good. And so I just have to find the right people for them. I have to find where are they? Can I start a conversation with them? Can I get in front of them in that context and share with them what we have? And so when it was like, for example, Dan Norris's book, that's a killer book. Like, it's an awesome book. It was really well done. And that makes life easier when you're working with something that good. But it's just a matter of, who are the people out there who would resonate with the concept of starting a business in 7 days? Well, it's not rocket science, but actually applying it is kind of can be difficult. And so it's a matter of, the execution in terms of strategy versus tactics. So that's the overarching strategy maybe, but the actual tactical level, how do you apply that? How do you get in front of people? That's different from, business to business, book to book. But for us, for the 7-day startup, it was a matter of how do we get, Dan already had this massive platform, but then also can we connect other influencers with similar platforms? Can we get in front of other audiences that are already interested in this subject and just share with them the book that we have? So that's my methodology, I suppose, and kind of how I approach marketing. Yeah.
And so let's dive a bit more into that sort of approach of the getting in front of influencers as well. Can you break that down? Because that's a real process, I think, that everyone needs to understand, and it'd be great to have your insights in it, because I know, you've worked with some of the top guys, certainly online, the likes of John Lee Dumas, and setting up collaborative projects, and your original creative projects have been incredible. So you've done that exceptionally well, and you did a great job for Dan. So yeah, can you share a bit more into your experience there?
Yeah. So in the context of influencers and stuff like that, so just to define that, it's really, I consider an influencer anybody with their own platform, and with their own audience and people listen to or respect or follow. So obviously that's a very broad range of people. And online, you can see these people. Like you mentioned John Dumas, and he's got this massive platform, and he's built up an incredible business through Entrepreneur on Fire, and Antonio Centeno is another great guy, and obviously Dan Norris, working with him on his book and stuff like that. So connecting with these guys in the first place, there's always going to be a hint of luck, but in some of these relationships that I built, it's kind of I have been lucky in that somebody's connected me with somebody else who connected me with somebody else, and all of a sudden now I'm working with, John Dumas on High Speed Low Drag along with Antonio Centeno. It's like, okay, that was through one connection leading to another, through one person connecting me with somebody else. And I guess that's an important point to start on, because you have to be open to those kind of connections and those relationships, and you have to be kind of headed in a general direction so that people know to connect you with other people. So step one, I think, is if you're looking to kind of build connections with influencers or to leverage influencers, you have to be moving in a certain, pattern, so to speak, or a certain trend line where the people you do connect with, they'll figure out ways to connect you with other people where they see fit. So if that makes sense. So it's saying, how do you expose yourself? We talked about anti-fragility before this, but it's that whole concept of black swan, right? How do you expose yourself to, unlikely events in a positive way, right? So step one is making sure that people understand like who you are and what you're about, not in a forceful way, but I suppose to do that in a helpful way, in a service-based way. How can you? So I always look into building relationships by saying, how can I help you in the first place?
That's a brilliant question.
Yeah. And every conversation, what are you working on? Where can I help? How can I help you right now? And it's crazy because not many people do that, but it's so powerful when somebody, it's funny the responses I get. Sometimes people are like, wow, I didn't expect that. And it's for big names, they don't need my help probably for the most part, but for the little guys or whatever, for anybody kind of hustling, trying to make a name for themselves, I think that's something that's going to stick with them. So I guess first and foremost, it's connection with influence is about relationship building, and it's about taking the time to actually like get to know individuals. So that's step one. And then I'd be happy to dive into how we did it for different books and stuff like that, if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great, mate, if you're happy to share. I mean, let's stay on Dan Norris because he has been on the show and, it's a great example. So, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So for Dan, a couple benefits of working with somebody like Dan is, one, good writer, two, has massive. Okay. He has a very big platform, but more importantly than a very big platform is a loyal following. It's just kind of crazy. Not everybody, even somebody with the size of the audience that he has for WB Curve, which I think was like 10 or 12,000 at the time when we launched the book, which is a good size. More important than that was the interaction or the engagement, if you will, that Dan had with his audience. So he's already been building that for a while. He already had that engagement. And so for us, it was and then it's not only with his audience, but then, with the other people that he's connected in the same sphere. So to launch the book, one of the things we did was we wrote out a list of influencers, essentially people that Dan knew directly or indirectly, people he knew who were influencers. So we've already defined that. And we just wrote that list out and we came up with, maybe 100 names, starting with people that he knew pretty well, or very well, who would definitely be up for sharing. And there were a good amount of those. And then going all the way to people he didn't know at all, but maybe we could do a cold email and see if we could connect with them. So again, just writing out an extensive list of people that were in the same area whose audiences we believed would resonate with the book. And then kind of methodically going by one, sending emails to every single one of these people about the book when we launched.
And how many emails would you have actually sent?
Oh, geez. I don't know, 50 to 100 or so.
Yep.
And now I would do the same thing probably for any book in that context too. Here's a pro tip. Individual emails, like one-to-one emails, are so much more powerful than blanket emails. Obviously, probably more powerful than that might be a phone call or a Skype call. But I mean, people just are busy, don't necessarily have time for those kind of things. Or in person might be the most powerful. But the nature of online and being able to try to scale things, I understand that's not realistic. So, but a personal email is a really powerful thing. So we leverage that big time. And I did that for my own campaign recently to crowdfund Collaborate. I contribute. Probably 50% of my success was having built the platform that I built at tommorkes.com to a degree, like my readership. But then the other 50% was hustling those individual emails and promoting and asking people to share. It wasn't even, I didn't ask people to buy, I just asked people to share the book. And we did the same thing for Dan Norris. And what you'll find is that when you ask people to share, what's going to happen? A lot of times they'll buy themselves and then they'll share it. And so it's like, one of those things, like how do you come off not being pushy? Well, you just ask for something very simple. You make it very easy for people. You say, hey, this is what I'm writing. I think you'll like it because of this, and it'll help your audience because of this. If you wouldn't mind sharing it, that would mean a lot to me. And more often than not, you'll find that people will share. At a minimum, they'll share, especially if you add like click to tweets and stuff like that, make it really painless, which we did. And I do for all the books that I promote.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so in terms of crafting those emails, I'm interested, getting into that nitty gritty level. What do you see as being, what's your formula for crafting those outreach emails?
Yeah, let me actually pull up my swipe file here. So everything I do, I template out, and I'm like, try to figure out, To a degree. And by the way, for individual emails, I'll always start with a template, but I'll always modify it so it is personal.
Yeah.
So obviously that's going to save a lot of time. So give me a second while I pull it up, and I'll get into the nitty gritty of this. But as I pull it up, I'll say that that when I start, it's funny because so as we break down that list, the people that you know pretty well, they're the ones obviously who are most likely to share it. If you know somebody pretty well, the difference is I think that's pretty standard. So that might be one type of approach versus the person that's completely cold, cold email or cold call or whatever. So if I was to send something like, about a book, I might say, hey, do you have a few, could I borrow a few seconds of your time? Might be the headline I'd use. And then inside, I'm going to actually I'm going to very briefly say, hey, I would start as, again, when it's an influencer, I want to remind them why they know me, if they do, if it's kind of an acquaintance who maybe we haven't talked to in a while. So some kind of the first intro, the beginning of it is going to be some kind of break the ice kind of thing, a reminder of why I know them, they know me, or how I've supported them in the past. That's how I start everything, is letting, whether it's something they've said on social media recently or some product that I bought from them a long time ago, say, hey, I'm a member of such and such course, or hey, I met you at this conference, you did a great presentation, whatever. And then I'm going to go into the really short pitch for what the book is and why I'd love to share. And so for us, it was for Dan Norse's book, it was pretty simple. Hey, this is a new book that's about starting a business from scratch in 7 days and Dan's journey doing that. So Dan sent these personally, so he's going to do it in his voice and everything like that. And different authors have different voices, but that's the general construct. And then we'll put in a click to tweet to make it super painless, or send people to a page that has really easy share options so they can share directly from a page that you have set up.
Gotcha. And so on that page, is that, I remember with Dan, he'd sort of provided a bunch of resources and stuff as well.
Yep.
So that was the page that you're talking about in this instance?
Yeah. I think, it's a good question on that one. I'm trying to remember how we did it because something shifted after the launch. But I believe, we sent people back to, he had two pages he had a resource page, which was, bonuses for people who read the book. Go check out the resources, a bunch of additional free stuff that's really valuable. And then he had a second page that was like a click to tweet page. And I'm actually going to pull that up right now while we talk. But it was, and it was like a quotes page. So that made it in the context. Yeah. So he had a quotes, resources, and then the actual 7-day startup book. And so in the quotes one, if you click that, you'll see all these click to tweets. So he could send people directly to this, and it would be an easy way to share. In the context of maybe what I did for for the book, for my most recent book, Collaborate, I created, I don't know, maybe like a half dozen different click to tweets or easy things that they could copy and paste into a Facebook post or Twitter or whatever. And I would, make sure that one or two of those was in every email that I sent. And again, trying to make it so if one of the influencers, here's a great way to get influencers to support you, make sure that they're in your book or they're in whatever you're creating, or you reference them in some way, shape, or form. So in that case, you can reach out to these people that would most likely, in a lot of cases, might, especially a cold email or something like that for somebody you don't know very well, an influencer you don't know very well, but you've mentioned them in your book. And you can say, hey, I mentioned you in my book, and here's a click to tweet or something like that, if you wouldn't mind sharing it. Not exactly, I'd massage that language a lot better. That really seems self-serving, but you can do it. But the thing is, if somebody's been mentioned in it and it is positive that way, they're going to be more inclined to share it, even if it is a cold email. But again, I take a step back and say that cold emails are never the best. It's never the best to try to leverage influencers or whatever, or anybody with a pitch for a sale or anything like that. Again, so much of it starts way before you ever need that relationship. So you have to build that relationship long before you ever need to use it.
Yeah, that's one of Seth's big things, isn't it? You start marketing your book long before you write it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. And Tom, I'm interested as well. Have you seen, because we wrote a book at the start of the year and followed a lot of these principles, and it's been great to get that done. An awesome project to ship and all that kind of thing. One of the things that I'm interested in as well is that, have you seen any books go through like a relaunch process? And the only one that I can think of at the moment is probably Ryan Holiday's Growth Hacker Marketing, where they released the sort of really brief or relatively brief ebook, and then now they're releasing a second edition, I guess, of expanded examples and case studies and all that kind of stuff as well. Have you seen other people do a relaunch well?
That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a second. So really good relaunches. Do
you think there's scope for relaunches? Say, in the 7-day startup even, do you think there would be a time where you've had this initial burst that's gone really well? At what point, if Dan was interested, obviously, at what point and how might you approach a relaunch?
No, that's a good question. It's funny because as you said that, I just remembered I interviewed Dan Schabel a little while ago, who wrote Promote Yourself. And so he was doing a relaunch of that book. So in that context, I think the original was written, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't know if there's a real science behind how long you should wait, but probably you should wait at least a year. The second piece is when you're doing a relaunch for something like that, you have to have additional case studies. That's the most powerful thing. So in Dan's case, what I would recommend to him is he's basically started this kind of like mini movement for people trying to launch businesses in 7 days. And that's what he's leveraged his Facebook platform or the Facebook page we created. So we created this ambassadors page where people could join and then we could communicate with them. And when the book launched, we could ask them to share and to read reviews. And then Dan has in a very smart way, let this page evolve into just the 7-day startup page where people can join for free and they can engage in this conversation together about the 7-day startup and about starting businesses in 7 days, which is so powerful. Again, kind of activating and catalyzing an audience and kind of galvanizing them, if you will, getting them to come together to talk about a similar subject. So in that context, what Dan's going to get out of this is a lot of people experimenting with this. And what's inevitably going to happen is people are going to be successful. There will be failures, of course, but more importantly, there will be success stories that come out of it. So if you were to do a relaunch, I would say wait, give yourself about a year or so, or whenever you have a dull time, and then go back through and add in a bunch more case studies into your book, and a bunch more stuff like that, additional resources, whatever. And then you can go through the exact same style relaunch and either hit up the same that's going to be the tough part is how do you promote that if you've already promoted it through certain platforms. Well, there's tons of new platforms always developing and building, and you can actually just spread your message now to dozens of new platforms that you haven't yet promoted to, and you have a great reason to because it's a relaunch. So I think it's an awesome strategy. I think especially nonfiction business book authors should not discount that. There's always a reason to do a new update. And again, a great incentive to continue to spread and share the word after something's been out for a year or so is by doing that kind of relaunch, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, interesting. Yeah, great to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, so I guess for you then, we've talked about what has worked really well in your experience. I'd be interested to hear what has been your most surprising finding in sort of your entrepreneurial journey so far, your most surprising result, I guess.
What surprises me kind of again and again in some ways is that there are people out there, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of this or ever get to the point where this, at least I hope not, I never take it for granted, but there are always people out there who are willing to pay money for your ideas or products or services. And that I think we let that fear of whatever that fear is, however it manifests in us not launching. So many people not writing the book or not putting it out there or not selling their product or service or whatever. They have these great ideas and they go nowhere. I think because of that fear, and that fear again that manifests itself and it stops us from actually putting stuff out there. But what I found time and time again is even for the things I put out, like this, my most recent book, every project I approach, I think it's going to be a complete and utter failure. Like I really feel that way. And I have go through this, like the same process every time. So it's like with Collaborate, with my most recent book, I was like, nobody's going to like this. People are going to think it's stupid. I am going to be lucky if I can get this funded. I might just have to fund it myself, like pull out a few $1,000s and fund it myself if I really want to go forward with this. But what you find is as soon as you put it out there, I've constantly been surprised in a good way that people are willing to support and they're willing to share ideas and they're willing to put money down. And in some cases, quite a bit of money, depending on what you're offering. And so I guess I say that, and it also doesn't have to be the prettiest or most well laid out thing in the world. So I am pretty methodical. I am methodical about how I set up my launches and stuff like that. I try to be, but I feel like every launch I think is going to be a failure because I'm not doing this. I'm forgetting this. Like this isn't as good as I want. This funnel isn't set up the right way. I'm not sure about this copywriting. I'm not sure about these images. A million different excuses.
Moving parts, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a ton. And every time I feel like I'm going to miss something or I'm going to, completely blow up in a bad way. And so far, knock on wood, everything is and I have had some projects that didn't turn out great. Some of the individual ones that I've launched before, or they start off okay, but it wasn't enough customers or something like that to validate it. And that sucks. But I guess the big lesson learned was things don't have to be perfect, and your idea doesn't have to be completely perfect or completely fleshed out to actually launch it and get feedback and get actual paying customers. I don't know if that
was a massive lesson that I took from Dan's book, actually. It's like the only validation you should listen to is the paying customer validation.
That's it.
In his example particularly, but that 7-day startup, that was a fantastic lesson, I thought.
Yeah. So now I'm at the point actually where I'm so comfortable with that principle because I had not read the book when I'd done it myself. Similar kind of, although mine probably took a couple months. But now I look at it and I say to myself, and I've always been of the mindset, how do we validate something before we bring it to market in a big way? And so it's always been about pre-orders or getting early bird specials.
Yeah.
So now the challenge for me is, how do I make sure that I always consistently over-deliver? So I believe in over-promising, but I also believe in over-delivering. So I want to make big promises, but I want to back them up and then some, which challenges me. But that puts an incredible amount of pressure, though, on what I do as well. So I don't know if I necessarily suggest it for other people because, depending if you're building a lifestyle business or something like that, it might not be the best thing. But I think if you really want to push yourself to that level, it's a lot of stuff I've done recently has been selling something before it's been built, which puts an insane amount of pressure to then build it the right way and make sure the people who get the product or service whenever it does release are blown away by it in a good way.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy, I reckon. And it actually ties back to one of your early books, The Art of Instigating, which I love, that the importance of getting started as well. And I'd love you to explain a little bit more about that if you could for others.
Yeah. So The Art of Instigating, I'm still, really proud of that. It was just kind of this small thing, and it was a huge deal at the time because I was like so terrified to put my words out there, say, hey, here's a book I wrote. And that was I think it was only like 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy, but time flies. But I wrote it kind of as this kind of manifesto of these ideas that I had in my head, that I've been meaning to just get out there. And so it's small, it's free. People can go to my website, sign up for it and get it. And, the reaction's has been really good. People have really enjoyed it. And what it says is that really to get started, to go start today, which I know sounds cliche, but hopefully that it's a message that I think we often need to rehear. What is it? The quote from, was it Brian Tracy or something like that? Or was it about motivation? And it's like, or washing yourself. Like, you want to wash yourself every day. It's, you do it every day. Motivation is the same way. So my thought process behind The Art of Instigating was, a message to myself saying, this is why you should start. That you need to start, but you need to finish and you need to ship it. And then nothing moves unless you ship it at the end of the day. And then there's a million reasons to be scared, sure, and a lot of things things won't pan out maybe all the time, or you'll fail, but you're better off for it. Is essentially, I think, the philosophy behind that message. Yeah,
and have you gone back and reread it?
Gosh, I don't know if I've reread it in a long time. I haven't. It's been a while.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, mate, what's next then for you on the marketing business, these projects front?
Next is, I'm finishing up the crowdfunding for Collaborate, so a couple days and then I'll be done, which will be nice, just to close that up and then get to actually like finishing it, producing it, shipping it out early next year. So that's big. I have a few more clients that I'm working with in similar style as what I did with Dan, hopefully trying to create the same type of bestsellers, which we've had some success with too, which is pretty cool to kind of get people into that bestseller list and see these books up next to, the lean startup and stuff like that is really cool for me. And then, so in January, though, I'll be launching a new platform. Actually, that's because I've started this consulting and I'm like, well, there's a lot more people that need this help that either can't afford kind of what I would charge for it, which can be pretty steep, but then alternatively say, I also just have a bandwidth issue. Like I can only take on maybe like a couple clients a month. Otherwise I'm like, then I can't follow through. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to take out more clients than I can legitimately help. So I was saying, but if there's people that are willing to pay money for this, obviously maybe there's, I would think that there'd be a place for some kind of do-it-yourself style course or platform where people could learn how to do this. I can share all my information through that. So I actually lean launched that just about a month ago and have about 10 customers now in the pre-beta. So I'm building it with them, with their input. But like I said, I have these paying customers now who are now helping me craft this and build this. It's a great value to them because I'm giving them one-on-one attention with their books. And then I'm going to launch that platform, which is called, it's going to be called Publishers Empire. And so if you go to publishersempire.com, hopefully it'll be up at that point when this goes live. But that's what that's going to be. So I'm hoping that'll be a really a really powerful platform for people looking to publish their own books and to understand this, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I think is misleading about how to publish books. And there's a lot of people that use that lack of transparency in the publishing world to get away with either charging exorbitant prices, or they're just, they give advice that's not really great advice. So I'm hoping that this challenges all that, and that it can be a transparent platform and that hopefully the case studies from the people that go through it will be all the proof that I need to show that. So we'll see where that goes, but that launch is scheduled for January.
That'd be exciting to sort of give you that scale and leverage on, all the lessons you've learned, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, mate, just to wrap up then, I'm always keen to hear about learning and who you learn from. Who do you learn from?
To be honest with you, Toby, I learned from people like you who do these excellent podcasts. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I pay attention to guys like Dan Norris who are doing great writing. And then as much as I can, I try to work alongside brilliant people, because I think that's if I'm going to give somebody a life hack, I'd say go work with somebody who's brilliant. So it's kind of cool to be able to work in a small capacity with John Lee Dumas for High Speed Low Drag. And Antonio Centeno. These are brilliant guys that, if you don't know Antonio Centeno, I'll have to hook you up with him too. He's built this massive YouTube platform for men's style of all things, but he's just has millions of hits on his YouTube videos. And it's like, I
might have to check that out, I think, Tom.
Yeah. I need to take his advice and actually start dressing better now. But and actually shaving my beard or something like that. But, it's funny but getting to work with them, it's like, what's the best? So I can listen to them. Maybe I can listen to podcasts with them, which is great. It's a great place to start. But man, it's so much better to work alongside them to build something and to get inside their brains, because you're working on the project together. So that's why I'm a huge fan of collaboration, obviously. And that's why I'm writing a book on it. So I'd say if I could say that there's any way, the fastest, the life hack that I have for anybody who's interested in this area is connect with somebody who's already doing great things and figure out a way to work with them on a small project. And you'll learn so much faster and so much better, and you might make a lot more money too doing it that way than you could by beating around the bush or trying to do things yourself. I think that collaboration is a very, very powerful thing. So I encourage people to check that out.
Yeah. And what's a book that has changed your life or your worldview?
Yeah, we were just talking about it. Anti-Fragile before the call by Nassim Taleb. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Yeah, and that book was eye-opening, and just it's how I try to approach everything. The businesses I create, the products I create, the way I do what I do, and the reason I do what I do, because I always picture things in the concept or try to apply the concept of anti-fragility to it and say, am I truly setting myself up for success in the context of, will I blow up and in a negative way? Will everything fall apart, or do I have enough things going where, uncertainty and stuff that's like unpredictable can help me and help what I'm doing? And so that book I highly recommend, Anti-Fragile.
And can you share just one way that you try to apply it in your daily life? Or an example of how you try to apply it?
So one of the ways I try to apply it, and I hope I'm applying it the right way, that's the tough part about a concept like this is you don't want to interpret it the wrong way and be like, and be the turkey is the reference I think he uses in the book, right?
Yeah. That was why I was keen to ask and find out.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it's a matter of, I say to myself, entrepreneurship by its nature is uncertain, right? So can I hedge my bets, or can I benefit from that uncertainty? So for me, that means starting a multitude of projects. That's, again, another reason I'm a big fan of collaboration, because I can work on these things in essentially a part-time capacity and have multiple balls spinning, but also not the pressure to handle them all by myself, which would be I could not do everything I'm doing by myself. It would be impossible. But also I don't need a massive amount of overhead because I'm collaborating with people. So I don't need a ton of employees because I'm working with just a few people on these kind of smaller projects, but that still can bring in quite a bit of income depending on what they are. And they are in a lot of ways, a lot of these things I work on are not in different niches, but different demographics, different people that we're working with, different purposes. So yeah, I do publishing, and then that's why I kind of started the consultancy too, because it's just another thing, I guess, I don't know what a good analogy is. It's just another wheel that I have spinning now, that if something goes south with one of my other things, that I'll have that to fall back on. So I have maybe like 6 different projects ongoing, with more on the way. but it's also not something that's completely burning me out yet. And again, because I'm leveraging collaboration. So that's one of the ways I try to apply it. I try to make sure I'm doing a decent amount of, like, a lot of different stuff if I can, and kind of equally invest my time in all of them. So it's that whole 1N strategy he talks about in the book, 1 divided by N or whatever. I have a whole blog post about it I can share with you, Toby, if you'd be interested to share with your audience too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks. And do you have a favorite quote or piece of advice that you use for inspiration?
I'd say the one that I hope I can say it right off the top of my head. It's all courses of action are risky. So prudence is not in avoiding danger, but in calculating risk and acting decisively. Make mistakes of ambition and not mistakes of sloth. Develop the strength to do bold things and not the strength to suffer. And that's Machiavelli. And that, I think, is a really irrelevant of who that person is and in the context of like how he lived his life or whatever, or the other stuff he talked about. I think that quote is very powerful and something I try to live my life by every day.
Yeah, that sounds very Nassim as well, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Fragile and stoic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, Tom. Well, mate, thank you so much for joining me. The final question is just how people can connect with you. What's the best way?
Yeah. So tommorkes.com, TOMMORKES.com is going to be the hub for everything. If you're interested in publishing or checking out my publishing company, you can go to insurgentpublishing.com. Or, if you're looking at publishing yourself as well, hopefully it'll be up and running, but it'll be called Publishers Empire, publishersempire.com. And hopefully that'll be up and running and provide a lot of good resources for people, free and paid, for anybody looking to publish. So those are a few spots. But tommorkes.com is a hub, and you can basically find everything else through there.
Terrific, mate. Thank you so much again for joining me. It's been really just awesome to talk to you. Thanks for sharing everything.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So that wraps up the interview with Tom Morkes. I really hope you enjoyed it. This show was brought to you by our 33 free marketing templates. You can download them at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, our intent is to always deliver actionable advice, so your feedback and questions are really welcome, as are your suggestions for future guests as well. So please let me know on email or Twitter. My email is toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au, or on Twitter I am at Toby_Jenkins. If you enjoyed the show, we would love you to leave a review on iTunes, and thanks so much for joining me, and look forward to seeing you next time.